Everybody loves a ghost story. And East Anglia is rich in tales of the supernatural. In centuries past, East Anglia was cut off from the rest of England. And with its wild coastline and lovely countryside, this landscape has inspired tales of mystery and the macabre. There are hundreds of ghost stories about East Anglia, told by one generation to the next, and perhaps becoming a little embroidered along the way. But in the 20th century, ghosts became the subject of film and television. People's experiences of the supernatural were recorded, and television crews actively investigated hauntings. We have searched the vaults of the East Anglian Film Archive to bring you some of the most chilling ghost stories of our region. We have tales from Suffolk, Norfolk, from Essex, from Cambridgeshire and the Fens. We even have a haunting from Northamptonshire. To the best of our knowledge, all of the stories you are about to see are true. One of the earliest television documentaries concerns the haunting of Hanneth Hall in Cambridgeshire.
This is Hanneth Hall. It's a house with a story behind it, a house that is allegedly haunted. And set as it is in the desolate and windswept fen country, it's a story quite easy to believe. The owner of the house is Mr. Williams. Now, Mr. Williams, how did this story of the haunting start?
Well, I don't really know, but there have been some eccentric people live here, and some peculiar occurrences take place, you see. And I think probably...
What is the supposed story behind the ghost?
Generally suppose that when old Hanneth's wife died, he kept her in that bedroom at the far end there for 6 weeks after she'd died.
When was this?
Oh, in about the middle of the last century. And the maid had to take all her meals to her, and so on, for about 6 weeks.
And since then, in what way has she been haunting?
Well, of course, I don't think she has been haunting the place. So.
Well, what do the stories say?
Oh, the various tappings and messages through tapping. This is what is supposed to have taken place.
Now, have you yourself lived in this house?
Yes, oh yes, for many years.
And why did you move out?
Well, various reasons. For one reason, I got married, and my wife didn't like to live in a big house. She preferred a modern bungalow.
The ghost had nothing to do with it?
No, not at all.
Have you ever believed the story that the house is haunted?
No, never. I don't believe that this is haunted at all.
How do you think the story started then?
Well, some people, of course, may have come and lived here who've been frightened by tapping noises and bumping noises and that kind of thing, and of course, naturally, if they're of that disposition, they may have got the wind up.
What do you intend doing with the house?
Oh, we intend preserving it.
You're not thinking of getting rid of it at all?
Oh, no. You see, the house is classified as an historic building, and we intend to keep it as such.
With or without ghosts?
Yes, certainly.
Can I go and have a look round?
Yes, you may.
If Mr. Williams didn't believe in the haunting, Tony Cornell, a psychical researcher from Cambridge, did.
Mr. Cornell, Mr. Williams says that he's never heard anything when he lived here and just doesn't believe there's a ghost. What evidence has there been in the past?
Well, of course, there's the legend that the house is haunted, going back for some years. And previous owners have heard these bangings on the bedroom doors, and they've also seen an apparition of a little boy. But we're mainly interested in what we ourselves experienced in bedroom A. We do know that something peculiar happened then.
Can we go up and
Yes,
have a look
by all
there?
means. Let's have a look at it. is the room, roughly in about the same state it was in when we were here in 1957.
Yes, now I've been calling this a ghost. In fact, is it a ghost or a poltergeist that you suspect might be here?
Well, the difference between a poltergeist and a ghost in actual fact is a poltergeist throws things around, and a ghost is generally an object seen by someone in human form.
Now, when you investigated here, what in fact did you see or hear?
Well, we came into the room after having thoroughly looked all over the house and searched the room, made sure there was nothing peculiar in it, and we heard a series of taps, rather like this, much sharper, and they appeared to come from over the corner there and down this line here. Gould was on a mattress lying on the floor here, and I was lying opposite him, feet to feet, on a mattress there. And the peculiar thing about these taps were that they gave an intelligent answer or response to questions.
That would seem to rule out the possibility then that the sounds could have been made by the cracks in the walls of an old house. It is 400 years old. This would be one possibility, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, yes, but the kind of noise you get from thermal changes in woodwork are totally different. And this is the thing that we found interesting and in some ways worried us, because the taps would respond. We said, would you give us one tap for no? Would you give us two taps for yes? And we got a response to the questions we put. This, of course, is in some ways a misleading form of investigation, because you're putting the questions in the mouth of the person that's producing them.
But you are, in fact, satisfied that something happened when you were here that you can't explain. There is no...
Yes, indeed. It was phenomena of a peculiar nature. We did wonder whether perhaps somebody was trying to take us for a ride or not. People do try and take psychic investigators at times. But we're well versed in this, and I'm satisfied that there's something peculiar about this particular room.
Well, it probably won't work, but can we have a try, do you think, at calling it back again now?
Yes, we can do. There's no magic formula, you know. All one can do is sort of sit and wait. So if we just say, well, let's have some bangs. I think it's camera shy, you know. I should very much like it to occur.
Let's give it a bit longer.
No.
No.
Not today.
Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Corner.
Right.
Well, there we leave Hanneth Hall to its sounds and its bumps in the night, to its ghosts, perhaps. Personally, I rather agree with Mr. Williams. I don't believe in the ghosts one little bit, but I wouldn't stay here at night.
The Hanneth Hall story was a tragedy. A man who could not overcome his grief refused to believe that his wife was dead. He instructed his maid to bring meals to her corpse for 6 weeks. In a further tragic twist, the maid eventually hanged herself. Joseph Hanneth eventually came to his senses and buried his wife's body in the garden. One of the oldest legends of Norfolk has been captured on film. Most areas of Britain have their phantom dogs, but the most famous of these is East Anglia's Black Shuck. The legend of Old Shuck has become confused with medieval stories of the devil, who was supposed to have visited Earth in the form of a giant dog. The word shuck probably derived from the Anglo-Saxon word shucker, which meant demon. It may also come from local dialect, as shucky meant hairy. The story of Old Shuck is more sad than sinister. In 1709, a boat was wrecked off the coast of Norfolk, near Salthouse. The captain clung to his dog, but both were drowned and washed up on the shore. The captain and his crew were interred in Salthouse churchyard. The dog was buried on the beach. Since then, a number of local people have reported seeing the phantom dog, which is said to be looking for his drowned master. One man who claimed to have seen the ghost was Tom Starling.
Old Shuck? Yes, I see him, I should say, about 30 years ago. And where I see him was coming from Salthouse into Kellen. What a wonderful night it was. I always remember the moon was at its fullest. In fact, I'd never seen such a beautiful night. And as I was pushing the old bike, I heard these rattling of these chains. And I thought to myself, oh, well, that's nothing. That's just a matter of a horse straying off the marshes. And that kept coming nearer and nearer. And I thought to myself, well, I'd better stop here and let it pass. Well, as I got on the corner and I let it pass as I thought, and it was past me as a form as a great big black shaggy dog. And do you know what? There was a gate dead opposite, and that passed through this gate. Well, being inquisitive, I thought to myself, well, I'll see where it's gone. Well, when I got to the gate, that never had been opened. So I said to the villagers the next night when I got there, the whole story, and they said, well, that's nothing. That's what they call Old Shuck. He roamed these roads pretty frequently. He's been seen many a time. But I said I'd never seen anything like that before.
Well before the invention of television, ghosts attracted the attention of the media. In 1929, the Daily Mirror covered a story about a rectory at Borley. The house became national news. In 1939, the rectory burnt down, but in the 60s, Anglia Television made a feature about the site.
Borley Rectory, where fear, rumour, the unflagging efforts of sensation mongers and journalists starved of instant news kept the hot pot boiling for years. At Borley, that flamboyant gentleman, Mr. Harry Price, darling of psychic research at the time, spent many vivid hours exploring the essence of the haunting. In 1863, the rectory of Borley was built on the site of the former convent, and from then until 1929, noises and apparitions were reported regularly. The press became suddenly and belatedly interested. In the 30s, mad organ music was heard coming from a locked church, where lay the squire who'd started it all, and the incumbent of the rectory and his wife were plagued with pathetic, scribbled messages on the walls, as well as by violent poltergeist activities. But the rectory caught fire in 1939, and when Price began digging in the ashes, he discovered part of the skull and jawbone of a young woman, dead for about 300 years. The remains were laid to rest after the war, but even today, doubts as to the authenticity of the whole business are still raised by certain psychic researchers. It's so easy to make nonsense of it, they say, and demand more tangible proof than they are ever likely to get.
Capturing a ghost on camera would be a television producer's dream. But ordinary photographs can sometimes surprise the people who took them. In 1966, Anglia TV went to Woodford in Northamptonshire to investigate reports of a ghost that had appeared in the church.
The old village of Woodford, 7 miles from Kettering in Northamptonshire, is one of the most picturesque places in the county. On a sunny day, it has a certain quality of timelessness that can suggest any historical period, medieval, Caroline, or comforting Georgian. And the village church has a history which goes back far beyond the physical structure itself. Evidence suggests that 1,000 years ago there was some form of ecclesiastical building here. But it's not the remote past of Woodford Church we are concerned with now, but events in the very recent past. In 1964, 2 young men whose interests are photography and old buildings came to Woodford to take some colour slides of the church. Their names were Gordon Carroll and David Hasdell, both of Northampton. As you can see, the windows are above the main altar, and the composition makes for an attractive picture. So Gordon took his pictures at about 2 o'clock one July afternoon in 1964. He sent the negatives away, and when the colour slides were returned from the manufacturers, he glanced at them briefly and filed them. But last Christmas, when Gordon was preparing some of his slides to show to a small circle of friends, he noticed something very odd about the interior of Woodford Church. And this is what his slide showed. A strange white figure kneeling at the altar. The photograph aroused much interest and controversy, and even now, 8 months later, the subject still being discussed hotly, both in this country and overseas. Rumour, speculation, and attempts at scientific proof are centred on the church. A Sunday national newspaper persuaded Gordon to sign an affidavit in Northampton that the whole thing was genuine. At the time of his visit to the church, Gordon was equipped with an Ilford Sportsman rangefinder. This camera has a built-in device which prevents double exposures. And it was with this camera and a tripod that Gordon had gone into the church to photograph the coloured windows over the altar. Now, a senior technician employed by the firm which developed Gordon's slide said there was no trick photography, no double exposure, no flaw in the film or fault in its developing. I'd stake my reputation on that. Added weight was given to this technical statement by Canon John Pierce Higgins, Provost of Southwark Cathedral, and a member of the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Physical Research. He said, and I quote, "I firmly believe this is a physical manifestation. Probably Mr. Carroll, the photographer, is a clairvoyant without realizing it, and was capable of producing this monk." But what monk? Well, the rector of Woodford is the Reverend Louis de Casabianca. You've met both the boys who were involved the afternoon the photographs were taken. Do they seem genuine and sensible boys?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, very much so. Very much so, yes.
Well, what about this photograph, this apparition? Do you think it's a genuine ghost or what?
Well, I'm of two minds about it, really. It's been subjected to certain scientific examination with hitherto no positive result. So one must keep an open mind in these matters, I think, and await developments.
The Provost of Southwark thinks the apparition was a monk. What's your particular theory?
I don't know, quite frankly. I wouldn't myself hazard a guess as to the identity of it. I can't think who it could be.
A curious thing happened this morning. When I first came into this church, I saw you kneeling at the side altar in white vestments. This gave me quite a shock because it looked so much like the original photograph. Some people suggest it could be the previous rector dressed in his white vestment.
Well, hardly. He would not have his vestments on if he was kneeling between the two candlesticks. He was in the habit, it is true, of coming out and kneeling before the high altar before he said Mass. But he would not have his chasuble on. He'd be clothed in what we call an alb, that is a white vestment which covers you from your neck down to your feet. I don't think personally that is a possibility, but of course you don't know, do you? You don't know who it could be. It might be Canon Owen, mentioning his name. I don't think it is possible, personally. I wouldn't hazard a guess as to the identity of it, quite frankly.
Most lay people think of ghosts as being frightening and evil. Now, if this really was a ghost, do you think it's frightening and evil too?
Not all ghosts, or if there are such things, are necessarily evil. There is a difference between, I presume, there are good spirits and there are evil spirits. I would presume that if it was an evil spirit, it could hardly appear in a church before the Blessed Sacrament. I shouldn't have thought that was possible.
Skeptics will doubtless argue that the film was tampered with, despite the testimony of the film technician and the affidavit of Gordon Carroll. Others will argue that while you can't prove it was a ghost, you certainly can't prove it wasn't. It seems that the only way of reaching a firm decision is to have some accredited psychic investigator to examine the whole affair.
East Anglia is famous for its wonderful churches, which dominate the skyline. For more than 1,000 years, the parish churches have been centres of community life. They were used for everything from watchtowers and markets to places of worship, and many of them are haunted. The tiny settlement of Northwold lies between Thetford and Downham Market in Norfolk. In November 1956, an eerie event took place in the parish church there. In the 1950s, most villages had their own policeman. One particular constable covered 4 parishes and had more than 12 years' experience under his belt. One cold November night, the PC was cycling his rounds. He was eager to get home, and checking his watch, he noticed that the time was 10 to 11. If he could get to Northwold Church by 11, he could finish his beat. Suddenly, he heard a sound, the clanging of a bell. At first, he thought it was the church clock. But then he remembered. The clock had been stuck for years. Somebody was ringing the church bell. The officer cycled towards the church, counting the tolls of the bell, 25 in all. As he reached the church gate, the ringing stopped. He crept up the path. There was nothing but an eerie silence. The church was locked, but the officer took the key from under the mat and unlocked the door. His torch flashed across the pews, cutting through the gloom of the church. It was then that he noticed. The rope was still swinging, as though somebody had just let it go. But nobody was there. Several days later, the constable made inquiries and discovered that 10 years previously, the owner of nearby Fowden Hall had died. The anniversary of his death was the 14th of November, the very night on which the bell in the parish church inexplicably rang. The policeman in our story was not the only one to have a brush with the unknown. The police station at Haverhill in Suffolk gained a reputation for unusual goings-on.
So this was how you found it, open like this? It hadn't slammed shut at all?
No, the door was still open.
Well, it's obviously a pretty heavy door. It wouldn't be the odd puff of wind that would make it
No,
close.
wind wouldn't close that.
What did you think had happened when you came in?
I don't really know. I knew that I'd heard a door close and it sounded like one of these, but these doors were still open.
They have a particular sound?
Yes, yes they have.
So what did you think it was? Did you immediately think, the ghost?
I had that in my mind when I first heard the bang and ran up here, hoping to see it, but I didn't.
Hoping to see it? Would you like to meet him?
I would like to see one that would prove to me that they do exist.
You're sort of in two minds about it,
Well, at the moment, yes, I don't believe, I don't disbelieve.
Some people might think that for a policeman to believe in ghosts, it's a bit funny. I mean, you're supposed to be the sort of solid, down-to-earth types, don't you think?
Well, yes, but we are human, same as anyone else, you know.
Can you hear that noise upstairs? Well, that's the noise of the typewriters going, only when Alf Cartwright heard that noise, it was in the middle of the night and there was no one up there. Isn't that right, Alf?
That's quite right, yes.
What exactly happened?
Well, I just heard the typewriter start up, went up to investigate it and have a good look round and couldn't find anything. I came back down into the control room and heard it start up again. So I went up again and checked all the building and there was no one at all up there. The typewriters was covered up.
And that happened again?
That happened twice that evening, and this happened again 4 or 5 months later.
What makes you think it was a ghost?
Well, what else could it have been?
Could have been someone pulling your leg.
There was no one in the station.
See, some people might think you're round the twist to believe in ghosts. Who do you think ghosts are, or what do you think they are?
I think they're manifestations of unhappy souls.
Do you think you'll be manifesting yourself when you die?
No, I don't.
Whenever we speak of haunted houses, we tend to think of castles and stately homes. People expect that old buildings will have ghosts, and, as we have seen, to a large extent, they tend to do so. But sometimes, the supernatural can occur in the most unlikely of circumstances. In 1975, Fakenham in Norfolk caught the headlines with a haunting of a somewhat sinister nature.
In this room, 22-year-old Mrs. Rachel Abel and her mother Mrs. Joyce Doubleday lay trembling as a number of happenings took place around them. Strange sights, noises, even physical violence. Mrs. Abel saw an apparition at the foot of the bed, and her mother says she was nearly strangled by the crucifix that hangs round her neck.
Well, I think the thing that's frightened me most was this morning when my hair stood completely on end. And I've now got bumps on my head and it's still tingling from it. And my crucifix twisted around my neck so tight it was strangling me.
Did you feel that somebody or some mysterious force was attacking you?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did, definitely.
How about you, Mrs. Abel? How did you feel?
In the flat all the time, it feels as if there's something evil there. And it's very frightening, even when you've got the lights on. You can put all the lights on in the place and it's still there, the presence is there. It's frightening, and you don't shut your eyes in case it comes to you. I can't describe it, it's just awful.
And what other things happened to you? I believe you saw some apparitions.
Well, I don't feel that I saw what is frightening me. The other Tuesday night, I woke with a start at 2 o'clock, and I saw a woman in white standing in front of me. And I quickly put the light on because it frightened me. And I thought, well, I can't have seen it the next morning, and I didn't tell anybody. But apparently my next door neighbour had seen something the night before, and she told the girl downstairs, and she mentioned it to me. And I said, don't describe it, I'll describe it to you. And it's exactly the same thing I saw that she saw.
A neighbour of Mrs. Abel has also seen strange things. She's Mrs. Glenys Remington, who's seen several apparitions, and who shares the fears of the other two women.
Good. I can feel it here.
What do you think it is in there?
I don't really know. Just a person standing there and sort of staring at you all the time.
And it's a bad atmosphere?
Oh, it's nice, but it's horrible. It smells. Oh, it's a nasty smell. All stuffy and like something's gone off bad.
No scientific or positive explanation has so far come to light for these incidents, but the flats here are believed to have been built on the site of an old chapel, once used by Italian prisoners of war.
Seeing a ghost is, for most people, a terrifying experience. In 1982, George Davey of Halesworth in Suffolk described how he confronted an apparition with a gun.
In walked a gentleman in a brown suit and brown overcoat and trilby hat. He immediately walked straight to this wardrobe, stood up here, and started fumbling this about. I then said to him, who the you? No answer. I said, look, if you don't clear out and tell me how you got in, I'll bloody well shoot you.
So did you then get your shotgun?
No, I told him I'd shoot him. He still didn't take no notice, so I got one. I walked 3 or 4 paces towards him, as far as I dare sort of go. And he still didn't take no notice, so I said, well, all right, you old, I am going to shoot you. You please yourself whether you go or be shot. I went to get the gun. I opened the gun like this, put the gun here, opened the gun like this, kept my eye on him to get the cartridges out of here, and just as I went to put them on, he disappeared. And all I could see then was just a pair of shoes and some socks on the floor, and they disappeared the second after.
He disappeared, what, out through the door?
No, he just went. He didn't go anywhere. There was nothing there.
How did you feel after this happened?
I felt paralysed when he'd gone. I was all right when he was there, but as soon as he went, I was done. I was paralysed. I couldn't move. I went stiff.
You hadn't been drinking the night before, George, had you?
No, I don't drink. Only occasionally half a pint Peps, but nothing like that. There's nothing to do with it. I mean, I know when I see somebody, when I talk to somebody. That was a lot of rubbish if anybody thinks otherwise. He stood there and that was it.
Not all encounters with the unknown are hostile or frightening. Sometimes children claim to communicate with the dead. Parents generally dismiss these as imaginary friends. But in 1976, a child at the King's Head pub at Diss, in Norfolk, claimed to be in contact with a ghost.
One evening, Nicky was sleeping with me, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up again and looked across Nicky and saw the lady standing there, just a green hazy figure.
So you actually saw her yourself?
Yeah. And all I know is she said to me, "I won't harm you. Don't worry, I won't harm you."
Were you frightened?
No. Didn't seem to be any reason to be frightened, you know. She was so calm and pleasant.
I mean, you are convinced that you really did see a ghost. I mean, you hadn't had a few drinks that night,
Most of my
perhaps.
customers assumed that I was a bit tiddly, but no. I'd had a few drinks with the customers, but I was by no means tiddly at all, and she was there.
How do you feel, though, about the fact that Nicky seems to have seen something and is having conversations with a ghost?
At first, I felt a bit strange about it because I didn't, like John, I didn't really believe in that sort of thing. But I've accepted it. It hasn't hurt, and I don't think it will.
Lady coming.
Your lady coming? I don't know, darling.
Now, I know you haven't seen her yourself, but have you heard anything?
Downstairs, the room under the flat, we've heard if Nicola's been taken out. She goes to my mum quite a bit, weekends. And we hear her bumping, like a walking up and down. And that seems that the lady's looking for her. That always seems when Nicola isn't here, don't it? And people have said if we go out for the day, take Nicola with us, they've heard it. But not a lot.
Like a lady walking up and down, opening and closing doors.
Lasts for about
looking
10
for the
minutes.
babe, you know. Then when she finds she isn't there, she quietens down.
Are you happy then for the ghost to go on appearing to your daughter?
Quite happy, yeah. Doesn't worry us at all. For me, particularly. Doesn't seem to bother the child.
So perhaps she's got a real life guardian angel?
I think perhaps she has, yeah.
I have.
You have.
Ghosts can sometimes accompany an object. Miss Henrietta Nelson lived at Yaxley Hall in Suffolk, but her ghost seemed to follow her portrait.
Miss Nelson, who died here at Yaxley Hall in Suffolk on April the 4th, 1815, had apparently lived here all her life, but because she was illegitimate, had occupied a rather inferior position. The lack of two identifiable parents was regarded as a shameful thing for the child in the 19th century. In any event, Miss Nelson loved Yaxley Hall, and during her life she requested that when she died, she should be buried in the grounds. Her death was in fact sudden and resulted from injuries sustained after falling down a flight of stairs. As she'd requested, her body was buried in a vault in the grounds, and nothing more was heard of her for many years. Then new owners bought Yaxley Hall, and knowing nothing of the history, had the vault removed and Miss Nelson's burial place demolished. Soon afterwards, the ghost of Henrietta Nelson was seen in the grounds. Later, it came to be associated with a portrait of her painted while she was alive. Present owner of the portrait is Mr. Brian Hall, who lives at Banningham Rectory in Norfolk. Mr. Hall is a collector of all kinds of antiques and historic memorabilia, but he undoubtedly has a special affection for the portrait of Henrietta Nelson, not least because of a startling quality which he claims the picture possesses.
The fact that her face changes in the actual pigment. I mean, some days she's quite benign, and other days she's quite cross and irritable. One thing she does love is a sherry party. And as soon as the people have arrived and they are enjoying themselves, we look up at Miss Nelson, and she's absolutely happy.
You're really serious about that?
Oh, yes. Yes, her face actually changes.
Well, I don't think it's changed since I've been holding the picture here. It looks more or less the same. But
yes.
You've actually seen it change, haven't you?
Oh, many times, and many visitors to the house. And then, of course, she also follows her picture. I've seen her twice at Barton Turf, where we were living when I first acquired this portrait in the early 50s.
You mean you've seen her ghost?
Oh, yes. And at Smallborough, but only once here since we moved here in '59.
Under what circumstances?
Well, as I say, I acquired this portrait at the Hepworth Hall sale in the early 50s. And having cleaned the painting, it was hanging in our drawing room. And I went over to the church at Barton Turf one evening to lock up. And coming back and looking up at the west window, there looking out at me was Miss Nelson.
Are you sure you didn't mistake it for a trick of the light or whatever?
Not at all. Strange things do happen to me, and this happens to be one of them.
Has anybody else around here seen her?
Oh, yes. There's Fred Bartle in the village. Saw her in the bedroom above this room, which we call the Wanley bedroom, when we had the house open for charity.
Yes, when we have opening days in here, I look after the room, and one day there was nobody in the room whatever. And I took up a book like this had to read there, and I suddenly thought there was somebody here. And I looked round there and saw this lady stand there looking at that oil painting. And I looked back again, and I thought to myself, well, I didn't hear her come in. And when I looked back again, she was gone. And I thought to myself, I didn't hear anybody come in. And that was that.
Were you frightened at all when you saw her looking out of the picture?
No, I wasn't frightened at all.
Just to show me how she stood there,
And I've been hoping to find her again, and I wouldn't take my eyes off on her next time. She just stood there looking at that picture there like that.
And then when you looked again, she was gone?
Yes, she was gone.
Brian Hall shares his fantastic Aladdin's Cave of a house with fellow antique fanatic Sheila Day.
Well, when I first knew that I was going to actually come and stay here, I thought really she might rather resent my presence, because it was obvious that she was very fond of Brian. And so I was dusting or cleaning out this room, and I looked at her portrait, and I talked to her, and I explained that I was coming, and I hoped that she wouldn't mind. And I've always rather felt that her face, when I look at her portrait, is rather softened. She actually has a very sweet face.
And Brian Hall himself is delighted to have seen Henrietta Nelson here at Banningham Rectory in most unexpected circumstances.
Telephone bell was ringing in the back hall. I came tearing up this passage, and just about here, I thought there was a draped curtain. But I knew we hadn't got such a thing by the dining room door. And I looked in a split second, I realized what it was, or who it was. It was our friend Henrietta Nelson. This startling face, which I had seen on 3 previous occasions, one longed to stop and hold a conversation, but the bell was still ringing, and I rushed along and thought, this has made my evening. She was the last person I was thinking about at that particular moment, and I hadn't seen her at Banningham before, although I had felt her presence here, I mean, almost daily. But this is the first, and up to the present time, the last appearance of Miss Nelson.
Thus far, we have seen different manifestations of the supernatural, from phantom dogs to haunted pubs. But what is a ghost? For hundreds of years, the Church has taught that a ghost is the soul of a dead person trapped on earth. The traditional remedy for a ghost was to say a mass at the place where the haunting occurred, to exorcise the ghost and free the soul for the afterlife. In 1987, a special mass was said for the soul of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was executed at Fotheringay Castle in Northamptonshire some 300 years previously. Nothing remains of Fotheringay Castle, but some of its stone and its staircase were, according to legend, ripped out and put into the Talbot Hotel in nearby Oundle. However, it would seem that Mary's spirit went with them.
I came at 6:30 one early, January morning, and came in the bottom gate, went to unlock the door, and happened to glance up at the yard, and just, halfway up the yard there was this figure in white, or creamy colour, and I thought, the manager's wife's out early this morning. And as I looked at it, it started to glide down the yard, and I remembered that the manager's wife weren't even here, they were abroad. And I didn't know where to run to, whether to run to the butcher next door or in the hotel. Anyway, I ran in the hotel and shut the door quick and locked it, and I wouldn't go out to fetch any papers or, to take with the early morning tea. And, really was very frightened about it.
One reason that ghosts may appear is because of a violent past. A manor house in the Norfolk village of Brook is reputedly haunted by a woman who may have been injured in a sword fight. That's the story told by someone who claims to have seen the ghost.
I was outside, coming through the hall.
Coming through here?
Yes.
Yes.
And I was quite conscious by the feeling of warmth that I was encountering that I just wanted to open that door, and I did. Put it back and stepped a little down onto that lower step.
Yes.
And she was obviously listening to something and astonished to see me, but kept listening, and I was just struck with her beauty. I think that she's looking for her hand, because coming on from the back hall through one night, hearing a strange noise, very, very much like remembering my father sharpening a knife. I knew that two men were fighting in there. I could also hear the sound of the swords, and Claudia must have come from this staircase down through there. She'd been listening, and she came through and she lifted up her hand, I am absolutely certain, and quite by accident, the blade came down and her husband must have cut that hand off. Well, ever since then I've known that Claudia was not complete, and Claudia is here searching.
What about the inscriptions that there are scratched onto the window panes all over the place?
Well, now that's very amusing, because you see, learned people come here to see the house, and there's rather a difference in the translation, as it's in Old Latin, but every one of them says that it starts, I, Claudia.
Yes.
Either fairest of all women or some very complimentary term, and several say that it ends up with watched over by the chaste goddess.
Yes.
So I just say thank you so much, and make a note of different translations.
Yes.
Why do ghosts appear? Why can some people see them and others not? Sometimes a haunting can be triggered by a change in the landscape. A modern house built on the site of an old burial ground near Norwich saw some very strange occurrences.
I went to bed one night, I was here on my own with the children, and about 1:30 in the morning I woke to find 3 men staring down at me. Just the heads and shoulders, but they were definitely looking down at me. After 2 or 3 seconds I went to get up and they disappeared. I put the light on, nothing. I was a bit frightened for a little while and slept with the light on for a few nights. But gradually, thinking they were just ghosts and not humans, the fear disappeared. About a few weeks later, my daughter, she had a funny experience too in the house. She was here on her own and she heard footsteps going up the stairs. And no way could anyone have got in here because the doors were locked. Also, after about half an hour, she said the Hoover started on its own. She went out into the landing and saw that the Hoover had moved from one side of the landing to the other, with obviously nobody doing it. So the house really has got something, you know, to do with it.
This was not the first time that disturbing a burial ground had caused problems. In the 1970s, an ancient burial mound near Corby was flattened to make way for a new road. But shortly afterwards, the road suffered from a series of accidents.
Just behind where I am standing now, over 1,000 years ago, stood an Anglo-Saxon gibbet. It is thought that this gibbet was erected by the pagans. It was only the pagans who erected gibbets on high points, on mounds, and then laid out their victims in rows with their heads between their knees. Beneath the mound, when it was quite removed, we found at a depth of about 2 feet a stone circle with pieces of limestone erected all round the edge of it, almost as for drainage purposes, with one horn off to the northwest and another to the southeast. We didn't realise at all what this could have been, but it was decided that it could have some religious significance. And when I read of the jinx upon this road, it occurred to me that perhaps the fact that this religious object was found beneath wasn't generally known, and I thought I ought to contact someone. And so I thought possibly Mr. Sumner, a local occultist, might not laugh at what I had to say, and I was very gratified to discover that he took my suggestions very seriously and pursued, he and his son pursued some investigations of their own.
This is the road where all the accidents have been occurring to do with the mound. When Mrs. Brown approached my father, he suggested to her that there was the possibility of lays connecting up with the mound. Lays are sort of lines of power which ancient people used to use in religious ceremonies and things like this. They consist of lining up, say, 2 churches or 3. Also, you know, stone circles, they all line up. When the lays were upset, I should imagine this is why the accidents are occurring over here. I, in fact, found 4 lays that did connect up with the mound itself. I'll show you them more clearly on the map. As you can see from the lines that I've drawn, they all meet at the mound, and by putting a road through the mound and disturbing the lays, that we must be causing some sort of trouble for ourselves.
The question of why a haunting occurs has puzzled and fascinated generation upon generation. In the 1960s and 1970s, television investigations into hauntings became popular.
There are 2 objects still left for intensive research: the dark side of the moon and the life beyond life. As we only had a film van and 2 cameras, we chose the second. Night and rain in a house 400 years old promise much in the way of incidental shocks, with perhaps a revelation or 2 en route. And nothing in this foam-girt, owl-crazed, history-drenched isle is more conducive to thoughts of melancholy and the supernatural than a vast mansion at the sad end of a lane that appears to have been trodden out of primal grass by a party of punch-drunk dinosaurs. Tony Cornell is unpacking the bursting contents of his case to reveal some necessary tricks of his trade to our production assistant.
What do you use the oscilloscope for? Oh, that's a very useful instrument in many ways. You can take all sorts of recordings with it. You can start getting facts instead of imagination. If somebody thinks they hear a very high-pitched sound, for instance, and it's above the normal range, then you can take it through the microphone and see it actually on the scope.
For we are here to trap, if possible, some sound or echo, shadow or substance, of the ghost of Morley Old Hall by Wyndham in the roaring county of Norfolk. We've drawn a series of frustrating blanks in our search for final answers to the straight question: what goes on beyond this place and this time? Certain of our findings have been interesting, tantalizingly close to fact, but not close enough. These we shall remember in the long, unreal hours to be spent within this house. Anthony Cornell, chairman of the Cambridge Psychical Research and Spontaneous Cases Committee, has shown interest in our inquiries and agreed to carry out a detailed, blow-by-blow survey of this particular haunted house, stopping from time to time to consider the facts of our earlier research. Now, hard on the heels of the clock that picks off the minutes that lead to midnight, he's setting off to tour this wide house from the wing to the center, from cellar to roof, to find any evidence of the supernatural in this strange place that can number Saxon ramparts and a medieval moat amongst its older associations. And while Tony Cornell pursues his lonely investigation, we sit and smoke, think about the days past, and of the places we visited to discover light, to illuminate the unknown. In a country rich in every sort of spook tale and devilry known to man and witch, the search for amply recorded cases of brushes with the unknown seemed too easy by half. But to sift the good from the bad, the valid from the hoodwink, proved most difficult. We eventually chose to re-examine first the strange story of the ghost of Mannington Hall. The testimony of Dr. Augustus Jessup, antiquary, given while of sound mind and body. On the 10th of October, 1879, I drove to Lord Orford's from Norwich. It was my intention to spend some time at Mannington Hall in examining and making extracts from various scarce works which I had long been seeking for, and which I now learned were in Lord Orford's library. By 11 o'clock, my host and the other guests had retired to their rooms, so that I was the only person downstairs. Being of a chilly temperament, I sat myself at a corner of the table with the fireplace on my left. Occasionally I rose, knocked the fire together, and stood up to warm my feet. In this manner I went on until nearly 1 o'clock, when I congratulated myself upon the rapid progress I'd made with my task, and that after all I should get to bed by 2. I refreshed myself with some seltzer water and then reseated myself by the table. I had been engaged upon the last book for about half an hour and was just beginning to think that my work was drawing to a close when I saw a large white hand close to me on the table. There sat a figure of a somewhat large man with his back to the fire, bending slightly over the table and apparently examining the pile of books I had been engaged upon. I stretched my left hand to the pile of books, my arm passed in front of the figure, and it vanished. I was simply disappointed and nothing more. I went on with my writing as if nothing had happened, perhaps for another 5 minutes, and had actually got to the last few words of what I had determined to extract, when the figure appeared again, exactly in the same place and attitude as before. Then first there stole upon me a dread and a suspicion that I was beginning to lose my nerve. And that's the strange but well-authenticated tale of Dr. Augustus Jessup. Was it fact or hallucination? I spoke to Mr. Simon Carter, who's lived in the house for many years. Mr. Carter, what do you think is the explanation of Dr. Jessup's curious experience here?
Well, Michael, Jessup's theory, I think, is based on what he saw, a portrait he saw in the dining room of a Jesuit priest who was hung, drawn and quartered in Elizabeth's reign. Jessup had made a historical study of this man and later wrote an article on him. And what I think he saw was an association of ideas, produced also, I think, by the atmosphere in which he was working.
Has anybody else seen this particular ghost here?
No, and that's what I think rather confirms my theory on this.
Has there been any other phenomena here?
Certainly, we have a room at the top of the stairs that has a mild form of poltergeist in it. This was exorcised, I believe, in 1912 and walled up for about 50 years. There's a current of wind that rushes around the room, the casement window flies open, the door opens, and the light goes on and off. Apart from that, nothing more alarming than that.
Is anybody you know who's had odd experiences here?
Well, my wife has experienced just what I've described, but nobody has seen anything other than Jessup, anything visual in this house. Although we live in hope, I must say.
So much for report and conjecture about the startling yet traditional style ghost of Mannington Hall. One man, one account, one possible phantom. Yet certain areas have accounts more startling and perhaps better documented, where there may be at least a chance of psychical proof or disproof. This photograph, taken 30 years ago, is of a spiritualist who goes by the name of Ruth. The ectoplasm above her contains the face of a man she never knew, though subsequent inquiry revealed this photograph, taken 20 years before that of Ruth and her husband. The man, long since dead, fearing for his son's chances in life, appeared to Ruth with a message for the boy. Ruth delivered the message. The boy was helped greatly. I spoke to her when she was in a trance, possessed, she told me beforehand, by a spirit friend called Stephen, a long-dead priest who would answer all my questions about what they term the other side.
When did you first realize it was your duty to come back to Earth to help those on Earth?
When I realized the mistakes I made on Earth. The teachings I had given were not correct, and so I had to find a suitable instrument to come back and try to alter that which I had in my ignorance given forth as truth.
And is this the way in which all spirit people work with those on Earth now? They try to put right things they've done wrong themselves or thought wrong?
Not all. Some have a greater knowledge or gain greater knowledge on our side of life, and they wish to pass that knowledge on to those on Earth, and so they find a suitable instrument whereby they can pass on the knowledge that they have gained in the wider land of spirit. I knew Ruth before she came on Earth, and she was ordained to be my medium when she came into Earth and reached a certain stage of development. I have never spoken through another instrument, only Ruth.
Why is it given only to a few people to have this psychic experience?
You might say, why is it given to only a few artists or singers or musicians? It's the same. It is an inborn gift.
So with the words of the mediums in our minds, we attempt at Mannington Hall to reach by orthodox psychic means whatever spirit may still be abroad there. And Tony Cornell takes time off to see that the inverted glass isn't being pushed by any one of the party.
I'd point out to you an interesting matter. You can tell when people are pushing because if they push, they have to press with their fingers and their knuckles, not the knuckles. This goes white.
Definitely feel some sort of energy there, can't you?
Definitely.
Did you live in this hall at one time? Please answer yes or no.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you live?
Are you here all the time? Still?
Despite the roughness of the surface on which we performed this experiment, some interesting initials were spelt out by the glass. Initials referring to an acquaintance of the owner of Mannington Hall, Mr. Richard Cotterill. But this is too much on the fringe to help with the central ghost of the hall. So we speak to someone who's had what she feels are psychic experiences in this very room.
Miss Clark, we're very lucky to find you here. How lucky we'll find out shortly, but you don't live in this house, but you have had an experience here that you believe to be supernatural. What is it?
Yes, I stayed here a night about Easter time, and when I was crossing this room, I felt impelled to stop at this window and gaze out. As you see, it's got no glass. It's extremely cold day, but in spite of that, I felt this sort of wonderful, peaceful presence, and I'm usually a very rushed person. I felt myself slowed up, and I felt that it was a lady that was here, probably a very devout sort of lady. I sort of felt that she was probably a Catholic or something because I heard some Catholic prayers. and I wanted to look at the view very much. That was the sort of impression I received.
You felt as though you were living through what she was doing?
Yes, that was. I took on her mood, so to speak.
Did you get an idea of the period in which she was living, the historical period?
No, I should have said it was a good many 100 years ago.
Did any of your friends have any other experiences in this house apart from yourself?
Yes, the friend I brought with me in the early morning when I'd gone out to get the breakfast and she was lying in bed, she suddenly sat up apparently because she heard heavy breathing and a rustling or something.
Was she frightened?
She was a little, and she strained to hear it, but she couldn't hear it. She sat up, so she lay down again, and it occurred again while she was lying down.
Meanwhile, Anthony Cornell continues his investigation of the hall. This man is an expert, well versed in psychic investigation. If anyone can find traces of supernatural manifestations, he should be able to. Light and darkness. Perhaps this is the answer to many of our questions. Solitude and the dark, working on our imaginations, can play what tricks they will. And whether we truly see an apparition, or merely think we do, becomes immaterial. For this is the true unknown, not the hair-raising, spine-chilling tales of witchcraft, the turnip ghost fantasies and solemnly wrought Gothic mysteries of the past, but man's simple, primeval fear of darkness, and his need to rationalize this now irrational fear by inventing gruesome figures to people it, to body forth his fears that they may be recognized and perhaps accepted. Is the unknown anything but the unknown continent of the mind? As beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, does the supernatural not lie in the imagination of the fearful and dismayed? For science, as we are beginning to discover, can so far only give us the negative answer. The positive remains at large, a gaping question mark.
Well, Tony, it's now, what, 20 to 4. We've been here since about 10 o'clock. We saw you setting up. We saw you make a minute examination of the whole house. We've seen your various traps and things. We've heard what various inmates have had to say about the house. What do you think?
Well, quite honestly, I don't think it's haunted. There isn't sufficient evidence, I should say, at this stage to suggest that this house is haunted. Although 1, 2, 3 people have felt things, and there have been reports of the lady having been seen standing here. I don't quite honestly think the evidence is enough to say that this place is haunted. Today we're looking for what we call collective sightings of ghosts. And this is not to say that a person's personal experiences of a ghost are invalid, but from the point of view of a high standard of evidence, to make sure that it is haunted or not, we like certainly more than one person, and details. Clear details.
Would that rule out the experience of Dr. Jessup in Mannington Hall that we talked about earlier on?
Well, it's a case that goes back, what, 1879? No, I don't think so entirely. He was a well-known figure, and I think his standards of evidence were pretty high. It would be much better if somebody else had seen it as well. This applies to most cases. But the circumstances, his description of his seeing the ghost and experiencing it, are typical of what I should say would be a genuine case. His attention was called from the corner of his eye. The whole thing has a ring of truth about it. But I would like to have seen a record of somebody else seeing it.
And he's certainly the only one, yes.
Yes.
Now, one of the young men who lived many years of his life in the house said that one of the upper rooms was also haunted, in that two people he knew well had both experienced changes of temperature and possible poltergeist movement there. Could it be the same ghost of this priest, or is it something entirely different, do you think?
It might be, but there are very few cases where an apparition or a ghost or spectre and a poltergeist phenomena, this business of temperature drop and sheets being ripped off, that kind of thing is more poltergeist type. These two don't really go together. They may start as a poltergeist case, and people get edgy. These things are thrown about, their movements, and then they experience a subjective phenomena of seeing things. This is, in that order, poltergeist, then ghosts, but not the other way around.
We might expect country mansions or old vicarages to have their ghosts. Many of the houses we have seen are hundreds of years old. But ghosts can also be found in modern buildings. In 1984, a couple in Huntingdon refused to live in their council house because they claimed it was haunted.
Tracy and Eddie Gray and their 4-month-old baby Adam are now so frightened they've left their own council house and are living with Tracy's mother. For over a year they've been terrorised by something they believe is supernatural. Footsteps have been heard around the house at night, taps in the bathroom have mysteriously been turned on, and there have been banging noises. And one visitor was even hit in the back without any obvious cause or reason. We asked Eddie and Tracy to return to their house today to show us where these strange things happened, but Tracy is so scared she refused to go inside.
Until this started to happen, I mean, did you believe in such things as ghosts?
No, I didn't. I used to laugh. If anybody had told me this, you know, I would have laughed. But now it's actually happened. I don't laugh anymore.
Were you happy? I mean, does the house suit you, apart from the ghost? I mean, is it the kind of house you want?
Well, yeah, it was. It was, you know, we were settled. We'd done the house up to where we wanted it. And we were settled, you know, we were a family, but, you know.
Was the baby upset back?
Yeah. Now we're not at home. The baby's settled during the day now. And yet at home, he wouldn't sleep during the day. He played up.
Okay. Eddie, will you take us inside and show us some of the places where things have happened?
Yeah. If you want.
Please.
Okay.
Okay, so where was this baby rattled?
It was on the stairs there. And we were talking in the front room. And we heard this rattling, this rattle goes, and I asked my wife what it was. So it's the baby's rattles, he had hit them. But the rattles were on the stairs all the time.
And you could hear them rattling?
Yeah, it sounded like someone had thumped them, as if the baby had thumped them and they were spinning round.
Yeah.
But when we come out, we just found them lying flat on the stair there.
Okay, so what happened with the tumble dryer?
Well, I'd come round in the morning with my uncle and we'd come in and I'd put some nappies into the tumble dryer to dry them for the baby, and I'd set it on 50 minutes. 50 minutes. And I come back about 4:30, and all that happened with this tumble dryer was it had gone to there, and it was still going, and all the nappies were scorched and everything. But the actual timer is like an egg timer. It's a wind-up one, so there's no way if that would even have cut out, that would have finished its cycle anyway.
And you had it checked out by an electrician, did you, to make sure it was all right?
Well, the council bloke, when he come in, he turned it on to 20 minutes, and after 20 minutes was up, it went back to 0, and it was completely off.
So how do you explain what's going on in the house then?
I don't know. There's definitely something going on.
How do you feel being here now?
Well, I'm all right if there's a few people about, but I can come during the day and pick up mail, but I wouldn't like to be here at night.
The local council said today they'd consider any medical evidence which showed that Tracy or her baby were suffering. But a spokesman added they are not a priority case for another council house. Tracy's doctor supports her demand to be rehoused, as does the local church. Whether real or imagined, this is a very frightened young family.
Ghosts may be attached to places rather than buildings. which explains why modern houses, built on older sites, may be haunted. But the moving of furniture, or the throwing of objects across a room, does not necessarily mean that there is a ghost in the house. These may be caused by poltergeists, and these are not thought to be spirits of the dead. A poltergeist may be a force, possibly caused by static electricity or electromagnetic fields. Nevertheless, the experience can be frightening. More disturbing is what can be raised by dabbling with evil. In the 16th and 17th centuries, most people believed in the power of witchcraft. Ordinary people were terrified of the harm that they believed witches could cause to their neighbours. Sudden illness and misfortune were often blamed on witchcraft. But witchcraft was difficult to prove in court, and gradually the belief that witches could cause harm faded. The passage of time has not, however, lessened our fascination with the unseen, and often the dangerous. In the 1970s, the Church of England became concerned that dabbling in the occult was becoming a popular form of entertainment.
Mr. Willis, you told the York Diocesan Synod that people are now dabbling far more than they used to in the occult. What exactly do you mean by this?
Well, people are consulting mediums a lot more than they used to do. People are dabbling in black magic. A lot more people are dabbling in black magic. Not only the sort of student population, but quite a lot of middle-aged people are as well. And people are dabbling in home seances far more than they used to do. You know, the glass and the cards, or Ouija boards, or something like this.
But I think there are all sorts of people who may have, you know, a spooky seance to form the end of a party, but who don't then need to call in the vicar to perform an exorcism. Why is it so serious?
Well, I think it's like anything. You can sometimes get away with say your treatment of electricity. You can put a wet hand into the back of a television set and not get a shock. But if you go on doing it long enough, you will. It's rather the same with this, that sometimes you can get away with it and not have very much happen at one of these home seances, but if it's continued in long enough, people will find that things do happen, and pretty nasty things as well.
Well, what sort of things? So what are the harmful effects that this dabbling can have on people?
Well, usually they begin to get messages which they can hardly believe at first. They check out the truth of these messages and they find they're accurate. So either then they throw their Ouija board away and say, we're not having anything more to do with this is weird, or else they get obsessed with it. And then they find that these messages become more frequent and more accurate until they get hooked. And then eventually, at some point, the big lie is passed. Somebody gets told it was his brother that stole his wallet, and that causes a family row. Or someone is told his wife's been unfaithful to him. Or someone is told, you're going to die 3 weeks on Thursday. And then there's panic. This kind of destructive lie.
Well, would you say, though, that there really are such things as external evil spirits, or are they just manifestations of disturbances inside individual human beings?
Well, I think to begin with, a lot of these home seances, they're playing around with a common mind. And to begin with, this is a psychological force, and they're merely picking one another's own subconscious and get quite a lot of rubbish at first. But then you'll find with some of these seances, something outside begins to feed information which is not known to the group. Something very odd which begins to try and dominate the group. And I would say this is definitely an outside occult influence.
Well, why do you think people are turning so much to the occult now? Is it perhaps a reflection on religion, that religion has failed people in some way and they're now turning to more primitive things?
Yeah, I think probably it is. I think you're right about the primitive, that in this great technological age with computers and everything, everything's in a turmoil. People have lost their hold on traditional beliefs and are therefore turning back to the primitive, sex, violence, witchcraft, what one might call the simple things of life. And at the same time, people have, in our generation, said, well, I think material things can bring me happiness. They've done this for so long and found it doesn't. So they've got restless, and having rejected God, they begin to say, well, is there a supernatural world? There's still a religious instinct there, and they begin to search for, in a wrong way, in a bad way, I think, for evidence of a spiritual world around us.
But priests are spending more and more time, you say, performing exorcisms. I mean, is this not really a sort of a spiritual con, in fact? You sort of get the vicar in and he says a prayer and everybody believes it's then going to be all right, they'll go away. I mean, can exorcism really help if there's an evil spirit about?
Yes, it can, and this is one of the commands of Christ. There was 3 things which he commanded his disciples: preach the gospel, heal the sick, and cast out evil. And this is perhaps a ministry which we've not had to perform in recent centuries because people haven't dabbled a lot. But now that people are dabbling, the church is having to sort of take out its ancient ministry and dust it and look at it again and sort of say, now what do we do? And this still is relevant. This really does happen, and we still have to minister to people
I think
who are possessed.
That there are probably cynics who would say that perhaps working with mentally disturbed people, which is presumably what this is perhaps rather a job for a psychiatrist rather than a priest. Would you agree with this, or would you say the psychiatrist and priest should perhaps work together?
Well, I would agree that they must work together on this. I wish more psychiatrists. There are some psychiatrists who would admit this kind of thing does happen, and I wish the psychiatrist and the priest could work together more amicably on this kind of thing, and we may be able to sort out, which is possession and which is a psychological state.
Now, you talk about the need for training the clergy to cope with this problem, but surely it's such a complex thing it would need years and years of study to enable anybody to be able to deal satisfactorily with it. What sort of training would you have in mind?
I don't think this is very complicated in the training. Simply an understanding of the kind of phenomena that can happen, the ability to analyse whether this really is a psychological state or whether there's some objective evidence that something odd has been happening. Has the person been dabbling in the occult? Do they have some odd gifts which wouldn't come with a psychological state, and so forth? Be able to recognise possession and recognise genuine haunting. And then I would say anyone who has a real faith in God can deal with this, whether priest or layman. That exorcism is not a sort of magic rite, it is a prayer, basically, to God, for God to act.
It is easy to see why our ancestors believed in ghosts, demons and witches. The landscape of East Anglia is often bleak and lonely, even in our age of electric lighting and modern comforts. Crop failures or misfortune were blamed on the work of the devil or witches. But like our medieval predecessors, people still turn to the church if they experience a ghost.
Father Paul Madison was a complete skeptic until he witnessed a ghostly happening in broad daylight.
And a young couple came to see me, very frightened young couple, and they had a little baby with them and were living in a flat, and told me that the kettle kept turning itself on whilst unplugged from the wall, and the oven would light itself for no apparent reason. I sniggered to myself, but obviously not in front of them, because for them it was a very real experience, and they were very, very frightened people, and they were concerned for the baby, that something would happen to the baby and so on. So I said, well, perhaps I better come round and look and see what we can do. And off they went, and we'd made an arrangement that I'd go around the next day. And off I went, armed with my prayer book and my holy water. And we got there and sat down, and we were talking just about how long they'd lived there, and really trying to find out some background to the whole thing, and who'd lived there before them. And they said that an elderly lady had lived there before, and she died alone and without any family. And whilst we were talking, the kettle actually boiled. And not only was it unplugged from the wall, but the lead wasn't plugged into the back of the kettle. And steam started coming from the kettle, which was a most disconcerting experience for someone who, up until that moment, had been a confirmed skeptic of the whole thing. And then after that, the oven decided to light itself. So by now, I was in the same boat as them, I think, really. And we prayed for the lady who died. We said the Our Father together. We blessed the house with some holy water, and we prayed that this family would be able to live here in peace and in comfort. And a few days later, I saw the couple again, and they told me that it hadn't happened since. And as far as I'm aware, it's not happened to the present day. There is a dark side. If we go back to Scripture, we read that Satan was an angel, created by God like all the other angels, but he took it upon himself to rebel against God, and because of this rebellion he was thrown out of heaven and ended up on earth. And since then we've seen the results of his activities. I suppose perhaps the commonest thing is that people are perhaps into the Ouija board thing, and that is seems very sort of innocent, and it seems like a bit of fun, and I think often youngsters sort of have a go. And experience shows that, you know, six people around a table, one of those may well get a terrible fright, even or the first time that they've actually done that. And again, that actually, despite its rather innocent look, is actually a very dangerous thing to be involved in. There are lots of cases of people who have actually suffered very severely as a result of even something as simple and accessible as that. And it's really to be avoided at all costs.
Hail, gladdening light of his pure glory poured, who is the immortal Father, heavenly blessed, holiest of holies, Jesus Christ our Lord.
What happens, it seems, is that somebody who died has not quite released their hold on earthly life. And there may be a number of reasons for this. It could be that they met a rather sudden and cruel end. It may be that they themselves committed some dreadful deed, which they felt was never forgiven.
Tales of ancient ghosts are known all over East Anglia. Everyone who lives at Ranworth knows of Brother Pacificus, the Benedictine monk who can be heard rowing across the Broad, even though he died nearly 500 years ago. In life, he crossed the water daily from the monastery at St. Benet's to restore the beautiful rood screen in Ranworth Church. While he worked, his faithful dog Caesar waited in the boat. To this day, Brother Pacificus still comes to pray before his handiwork, or so they say, though the present vicar would not entirely agree.
Everybody loves a story, don't they? I mean, the story is most important, and the Christian message is told by stories. Jesus told stories. So I think sharing stories is a very important thing, but what you make of the story, how you interpret it, is even more important.
John Cater has farmed in Ranworth all his life. As a young man, he witnessed a very peculiar occurrence here at the rood screen.
One evening, about the middle of November, must be 40 years ago, I'd been pulling mangles on a field called the Church Peace at Ranworth, and I'd been working with the verger all the afternoon. But before going home to Bastwick, I decided just to go into the church to play the organ for a few minutes. And while I was playing the organ, I heard a tap, which I took to be one of the pews contracting. I looked up, and the whole way across the stream, not just the chancel, but the whole nave, there were candles burning about an inch apart and about an inch high. I stopped playing the organ, I clattered down in my farm boots, down the aisle, got about halfway, and they all went out. I turned round a quarter circle and thought, came back to the organ, put my hand on the seat again to slide along it, I heard this crack again, And I looked up, and now all these candles were lit again. I've never experienced this church without a draught in it of some sort. These candles weren't wavering, they weren't flickering or doing anything. They were absolutely still. And as this thought came into my head, the most horrible, cold, damp, clammy feeling came over this church. And I was scared stiff.
There have always been tales of ghosts associated with the sea. One day, Peter Yaxley was out on the lonely marshes beyond Stifkey. There was no one else in sight in any direction. He was familiar with the area around the old sewer pipe. As he watched, a figure with a dog appeared and waved. Yet not a single mark was left in the sand.
I didn't really think very much about it at the time, but the following day I went to see some friends who had a caravan on the site, and over a glass of parsnip wine told the story. And the lady said, well, that must be old, and I can't remember the name now. I think she said Jack. And the husband sort of smiled and nodded and said nothing. So I asked her what she meant, and she said, well, it's a friend of ours who died several years back. He taught my husband to longline, to fish over by the old pipe. And he enjoyed Stiff. He loved the flat so much that when he died, he'd asked for his ashes to be scattered along where he used to fish by the pipe. And I said, did he have a dog? Because the figure had a dog with him. And she said, yes. I said, was the dog a rather large one, about knee height? She said, yes. And the man himself, was he a tall individual, say 6 feet? And she said, yes. And I've never really mentioned this story very much until now. I didn't believe in ghosts before I saw the figure. I'm not totally certain whether I believe in ghosts now, but there was something, it was totally inexplicable, and I lean towards a belief that there is, that ghosts can exist.
Everyone has his own reasons for believing in ghosts. But a ghost is such an irrational entity. It makes no sense. However, ghosts are reputed to haunt the most rational of places. In this case, Cambridge University.
'Twas upon a chilly evening as dons gathered here in the combination room for supper that an apparition made his most recent appearance. Now, I don't want to scare you or anything, but just a few moments after we arrived in this room, we did hear a strange knocking in one corner, pretty similar to what staff heard when they first saw the ghost. On that original occasion, the knocking moved over the ceiling and down into the wall behind me, and then just a few moments later, a figure appeared about here. It stopped and then disappeared towards the window.
The second time wasn't so frightening. I actually walked towards it. Didn't get too close, but again it just walked across the room and disappeared.
Who knows who the figure may be? Rumours abound that the soul of a past bursar who hanged himself from a bell rope lingers in torment. But fellows are nervous.
I was talking on the phone to one of the fellows last night, and she was reminding me that several of the fellows live in a block of accommodation just across the park there, and use the fellows' garden and the combination room as a shortcut into the college. And she said that none of them use it now, or will go all the way around the college rather than come in here in the dark.
But other staff, even those who have seen the ghost, are happy to continue working in the room in the presence of others.
And Sarah Yates joins us now in body and spirit from our new centre in Cambridge. Sarah, you mentioned this strange knocking noise, typical of our cameraman to have missed it, but what actually happened?
I'm not kidding you, we'd only been in the room about 2 or 3 minutes, but suddenly there was this strange knocking on the wall. It wasn't like someone tapping on a door. It was almost like a series of light thuds against the wall, and I'm not kidding. And Chris, who's the cameraman, is nodding his head right now. I jumped. My heart missed a beat, and even the people who'd seen the ghost, who were in the room with us at the time, they actually stepped aside and looked visibly shaken, and one of them actually went over to the corner to see what was going on. But I'm not saying we heard it, but it was pretty spooky.
I think you've got far too much Christmas spirit going here at the moment. I mean, seriously, what is the atmosphere like at Peterhouse?
Well, I mean, people are genuinely concerned. Even the theologian, the dean of Peterhouse that we spoke to, as a theologian, he says he's not convinced that ghosts, as in spectres covered in white sheets, are actually stalking the corridors of Peterhouse. But he says they would consider holding a requiem mass. That would mean a kind of exorcism, getting all the fellows of the college together in the combination room where the apparitions have been seen and trying to lay this troubled soul to rest. But he says before he's able to do that, he feels he has to gather a little bit more information about exactly what might be going on behind those beautiful oak panels.
Sarah will follow his progress with interest. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Some people will never believe in ghosts. For those who do, there is still the question of what a ghost actually is. I hope you have enjoyed our stories. And until the next time, goodbye. And sleep soundly.